Alright, today's video is going to be on driving dynamics. So, being Mazda, they fit a certain ethos across all their vehicles in terms of being fun to drive. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the driving dynamics, some of the technology that they've used in here. I don't know if technology is the right word, but some of the things that they've done that Dave Coleman from Mazda has spoken about publicly on a bunch of different YouTube videos that you can find. And I'll link one of the main ones that I found most informative in the description for you to all check. So without further ado, let's go for a drive. So my comparison for this car is not going to be any of my own personal previous vehicles because they've all been much smaller, basically Mazda hatchbacks and sedans. So I'm going to be comparing this, when it comes to the driving dynamics, more towards our last SUV that we had, which was a 2024 Toyota Grand Highlander. So in terms of size, they're both large vehicles, over 200 inches long. Main difference being that vehicle had a third row, of course. Lots more interior space when it came to, if you were to compare this to a CX90 instead of a CX70, the third row being usable for adults. And then little things like the storage, of course, the cubbies and stuff. That's where really the Grand Highlander excelled. But when it came to driving the thing, night and day difference between that and this CX70. Now, what I mean by that is the Grand Highlander was very numb, is the best way I can put it. Very little feedback or communication that you would feel through the steering wheel, through the chassis. Everything felt very isolated. Felt you're like riding on a couch down the road, down the highway. Soaked up bumps well, which was great, but when it came to any sort of spirited driving, you'd literally get nauseous riding in it, especially if you're in the second row, or even in the front passenger seat. Just with the pitch, roll, and just the motions, while everything was smooth, the way they designed that car to obviously be for comfort, for hauling a family around, as comfortably as possible, there's a lot of trade-off. And another thing that has really stuck out to me is steering. Not only the feedback that you get through the wheel, through the Mazda, but just the way the inputs react to what the car actually does. So you'll see when we get on this highway on-ramp coming up here shortly, I don't need to make a lot of steering corrections with this. It's kind of just point the wheel where I want to go and it goes. Whereas in the Toyota, you're constantly making corrections to point the car and keep it going where you want it. Now, a lot of that has to do with just Mazda's philosophy when it comes to how they set up the suspension on the vehicle. A lot of it has to do with how they utilize the all-wheel drive system. And then I think a big part of it has to do with the Kinematic posture control, which is on this vehicle, as well as the MX-5 Miatas, where the idea came from. So we're going to take this a little aggressively here, and you'll kind of see. '60, 65 plus around a nice sweeping corner. One steering input I didn't have to correct. I did have to slow down for this car in front of me. It took a good champ. Very little body roll, and the tires weren't screaming for their life. Granted, I could have pushed it harder had I not had anybody in front of me. But for SUV, being able to do something like that in a vehicle that's over 200 inches long and feel confident is amazing to me. So a lot of that has to do with Kinematic posture control. Like I mentioned, I'll have a link in the description with Dave Coleman from Mazda explaining more in depth how it works, but this is a technology that they doesn't work like their G-vectoring that they use on all their front-wheel drive-based vehicles. So this is a rear-drive biased all-wheel drive setup. Mazda and Dave Coleman, I guess, his intention was to make this thing handle like a Miata. Not that it does, but that's their motto. So what's unique about the Kinematic posture control is around those long sweeping or even those tight corners that I would normally take at speed. Not saying that everybody would that buys this vehicle, to keep the body flat and to prevent any like weird yaw moments. What Mazda is actually doing is measuring the speed of each rear tire, and obviously when you're going around a turn, the inside wheel and the outside wheel in the back, any wheel regardless, but the inside and the outside wheel are going to be spinning at a different speed. So based on that, Mazda is going to very lightly drag the inside rear wheel to bring the suspension back down to keep it flat through a corner, or flatter through a corner. And I think as Dave explained it, it keeps the suspension in the middle of its stroke, which makes a night and day difference. And I'll be coming up on an exit here in a couple minutes that we'll take. Now it's not only a long sweeping turn, but also has bumps in it. Now I will tell you, in the Grand Highlander, 55 miles an hour was about the max speed that you could take around that curve without feeling like you were going to lose control, because you were making so many steering input corrections. The body was just flexing, not only up and down, but side to side with the way this road is paved and all the inconsistencies with it. This vehicle, yes, you get the bumps, but you're not getting the crazy undulations. You're not making as many of the steering corrections, and you're able to take it at a much higher speed, which, as an enthusiast, someone that likes to have fun when they're driving, is something that's just awesome to me. It's one of those things like, I'm never going to take this car to a racetrack, but at the point in my life right now where I am, having a fun little sports car just doesn't make sense. But having practical that's large enough to do what I need to do, haul around all the dogs, all my stuff for work, all of that, while still being able to not be bored to tears while driving it, is seriously the main reason I bought this vehicle, aside from the cool car enthusiast stuff, like it having a 3.3 liter inline-6 turbo, wet clutch transmission, and just being a Mazda in general, just being fun to drive. So in this, we're going to take a couple off ramps. I'll take some side streets and some back roads here in a bit as well, and go through some more tighter, twisty roads that are at a little lower speeds, just so you guys can kind of get an idea of how this thing handles and some of the driving dynamics behind it. Now, another thing to talk about is how Mazda manages the all-wheel drive system on these. So obviously we know it's a rear-wheel drive biased platform. So the majority of the time, especially right now, like when I'm going straight, there's no inclement weather, anything like that. Probably about 90% of the power is going to the rear wheels. Now, what's kind of cool about what Mazda does when it comes to the torque distribution is they like to predict rather than be reactive. Now, obviously, there's multiple systems in place that are, running different algorithms, taking readings off of different sensors. There's a G sensor in the car. Obviously, there's going to be wheel speed sensors. Mazda knows where the center of gravity in this car is, so on and so forth. So, most, especially older all-wheel drive systems, you have a clutch pack at the PTO or PTU that is engaging and disengaging to distribute torque to the appropriate wheels. And usually it's doing that once it detects that one wheel is slipping. Now, Mazda uses that as kind of a fail-safe, like a last resort method. What they do is more rely accelerating real hard and the back of the car is squatted, it's going to know which tire or tires have the most force being pushed down on them onto the road, and that's where it's going to send the torque. Now then, obviously, if it detects steering wheel angle changes, it's going to adjust appropriately. And then lastly, too, when it does detect an actual wheel slip event, it will pull power from that wheel or tire and send it somewhere else as appropriate. Well, what's nice about that is you get more of a seamless driving experience. It's, like I said before, it's not reactive, it's more proactive. So when you have a moment like where an all-wheel drive system is reactive rather than knowing what it wants to do ahead of time based on the conditions, you get those weird moments where you have a slip and then you catch and then it corrects yourself. So I guess Mazda's philosophy with this is they want to avoid that. Make the driver think as less as possible about what's going on and just be able to focus on driving. So we're coming up on that ramp I was talking about where in the Grand Highlander you'd be kind of all over the place, and the max speed you could take it at was about 55 miles an hour comfortably. You could probably take it a little faster, but it was quite sketchy and I just didn't feel comfortable doing it. So we're coming up here. I'm going to slow down a little bit to give the car in front of me a little space and see if I can hit this with a little bit of aggression for you guys. So I'm going 70 right now, and we'll see what we can do here. So as you can see, very minimal steering correction, and I'm actually going to change lanes here. Hitting those bumps I was talking about, that would, in the Grand Highlander, throw me all over the place. And right now I just exited that turn at 68 miles an hour, and I'm approaching the next one again in the Grand Highlander. This would be a 55 mile an hour corner. I'm entering at 67 and exit at 70. So as you can see, this thing is taking corners like a champ, soaks up bumps well. If you're looking at one of these videos, for me, you've probably already seen other CX70 and CX90 videos where, the average person buying this car is going to complain that the ride's maybe a little stiff, but the trade-off is what you just saw me be able to do with that on-ramp, and I could have probably taken it even faster had there not been any other cars around me. So that is a good example of that. So we'll go ahead and loop back around, and we'll do a little bit more highway driving, and then I'm going to hop on a little bit of a back road section, and we'll see what's what. Just so you guys know too, I do have iStop turned off. Pretty much since the car had 950 miles on it, I've been exclusively driving with iStop system off. Not because it bothers me when it's on. The compression restart that Mazda uses to fire the engine back up, you can notice it, but it's not as egregious as like a normal vehicle where it's using the starter when you're at a stop. More so it's just me being a car nerd and just not trusting new technology sometimes, where I just don't think it's a good idea for an engine to consistently be shutting off, turning on, shutting off in traffic, even on the highway, especially with how thin of oil these cars use anymore. Like a 0W20 I can't see sticking to a cylinder wall for a whole lot of time once the engine's shut off, for it to just be fired right back up again and then thrown back in at whatever RPM you're cruising at and whatever gear you're in. So that's why I have it off. It's more of a peace of mind thing for me. I do not want to accelerate anywhere on this car as possible, if possible, aside from me driving like how I drive. But you look at most of my previous vehicles, they've gone those things. So let's get back on the highway here. We'll take a little drive back towards where we started and then hop on some more local roads with some tighter turns and whatnot. Now we are going to hit a big bump up here, so we'll see how this goes. Transmission logic and the accelerator pedal tuning is a little numbed down, but you can see even in normal mode this car is plenty fun to drive still. Mazdas that I've driven. I've had rentals for work that are CX30s, CX5s. I've had a CX50 rental for work, all that are like 2023 or 2024 model years. And the steering weight, at least on this, feels very similar, which is, I mean, that's always been a Mazda thing. They've always had a little more heavy of a steering wheel feel. It's not like you can steer it with one finger like you can some Toyotas, Lexus, and other like Japanese vehicles, where they kind of take the feeling out of everything and just make it, you know, as pure luxury as possible. But like I was saying, I don't think it's too heavy, and I've seen a couple recent reviews on the 2025 model year CX90, where a couple of reviewers have commented where they felt like at least the steering feel has gotten better when it comes to the weight, when handling the wheel and turning. So I'm not sure if that's specific to the 70 or if it's something that they've just done with software across the whole lineup of the 70s and 90s, you know, just based on customer feedback, which it does seem like they are taking pretty seriously with the transmission software updates that they've done to smooth out, you know, a lot of the 1-2 shift complaints that people have, as well as, you know, the software recalls for the hybrid systems on both the plug-in and the mild hybrid variants. So whatever they've done, you know, since the time the CX90 released at the end of 2023 till now, they've done a good job. So for those of you that, you know, are maybe turned away by some of the reviews, especially when the early ones where everybody was kind of complaining about the way this thing shifted. I think a lot of that has been pretty much mitigated at this point. So it's one of those where, one, if you're a car enthusiast, you come to expect, especially nowadays with all the technology that all these cars have, that they're, especially on a first model year vehicle, that there's going to be some bugs to work out. There's going to be some updates. There's going to be some recalls and stuff. That's going to be normal from this point going forward, just because these cars are so technology driven. But I think if you go into the expectation knowing that, like, hey, there's going to be a couple things that I got to kind of deal with until the next software update, or if you're not that kind of person, then, you know, this probably isn't the car for you. If you're just the kind of person that wants to get in, not worry about anything, and just drive, then you probably should be getting a Honda or a Toyota or a Nissan, something that's just, you know, an appliance that's, you know, it's going to be reliable for the most part, but you don't get the horse and rider as one philosophy that Mazda has. So, you know, that's where it comes to personal preference and doing your research, where I know, like, Mazda now, they're targeting a more premium client, and they're trying to jump into that more premium space. But at the end of the day, they are a sport car company at heart, right? You know, the old motto used to be zoom zoom, just making fun to drive cars. And now that they've matured and figured out what market they want to be in, and they're not coming in as the cheapest option on everything, and you see the improvements that they've made when it comes to interior quality, fit and finish, their willingness to go outside the norm, where everybody is going to 4-cylinder turbo and 4-cylinder hybrid drivetrains, where, yeah, that's what Mazda's always done, 4 cylinders and 4-cylinder turbos, especially for the last decade. But for them, which Dave Coleman said, it made sense for them, both financially, from a business perspective, and, you know, where they want to go with these new lineups of cars, to go with the inline 6, where you can have a very smooth, quiet engine that is able to make power, that is able to be efficient, is able to be paired with a hybrid system, but still maintain life, and not be completely numbed down and boring. It's one of those where I think if you're an enthusiast and one of these fits the mold for you, it's definitely something you should be looking into. Now, obviously, if you have 4 kids, a CX90 is probably not going to be big enough, just due to how small that third row is, with, you know, how far back the engine is mounted on this. It does compromise some of the interior space. But if you are, you know, an empty nester, a young couple, or you only have one kid and a couple dogs, you know, some of that, this and the 90 are definitely something I would look into. And you don't have to feel like you're just hopping behind the wheel of a lifeless, boring automobile every time you get in, and not feel any kind of emotion when you drive. So that's been my biggest takeaways. You know, I now have 3,300 miles on this vehicle, and I've only had it 3 weeks. So that's where I'm at with this when it comes to just the emotions I feel when I'm driving it, and just going through, you know, the daily motions. It doesn't put me to sleep. I don't feel exhausted when I'm driving it, just from being so bored. I don't have to find things to keep me entertained while I'm driving, looking around, playing games, or, you know, screwing around and stuff. Like right now, I don't have any music on, obviously for copyright issues and stuff, but I'm talking to you, but I'm enjoying the drive. Don't mind all this crap on the windshield. It's not wiping off right now because it's cicada guts that I've hit at 80, 85 miles an hour, and I haven't had a chance to wash the car yet. So we're in the Midwest. It's a big cicada breed this year. If I rolled down my windows, it'd sound like serpentine belt screeching, so we'll avoid that. Alright, so coming up here after we get through some of this, I don't even know what to call it. It's not really a business area, but we'll head into a little more of a back road type area, and we'll throw it into sport mode and take some twisties. And I'll show you what this can do at like a little more lower speeds and tighter corners going through some roads as well, since we've done some of the on-ramp entrances and exits so far. Now when it comes to the transmission, for what it is, being automatic, you know, I'm used to having a manual transmission car. This is the first automatic that I've personally ever owned. So it is nice being able to feel the downshifts. That's something I would do driving a manual during normal driving, is rev match downshift as I slow down, come to a stop, not use the brakes as much. And it's nice to see this doing it as well. Something I've heard about in some of the videos I've watched when it comes to how they explain some of the tech is obviously the electric motor on this vehicle is, I guess, a hybrid portion. The electric motor included is only used for certain things like torque fill. Obviously, when you're using the I-stop system, when the engine's shut off while you're coasting or at a light, it's going to use it to torque fill from 0 to 200 RPM to be able to get you moving before the ICE engine comes back on, and all of that. And obviously used as a little bit of a torque fill to mitigate some of the turbo lag you may feel as well. But the way that they've managed now, especially with, you know, this car has all the updates and stuff since I just bought it brand new 3 weeks ago. The improvements they've made compared to the CX70 I test drove at the beginning of 2024, it's night and day when it comes to this kind of driving, taking off from a stop and it not jerking you all over the place. And the 1-2 shift being, you know, crazy harsh versus now, like I can feel it. And a lot of that has to do with first gear is very, very, very short on this transmission. And the way it was explained by Mazda when Dave Coleman did his video that is going to be linked in the description is because of the wet clutch and them wanting these vehicles being able to tow, you know, 3,500 or up to 5,000 pounds depending on which trim level you get. Since there is no torque converter and they are using a wet clutch system to give you those direct feel, first gear had to be very, very short to minimize the time that the clutch is slipping before the gear's fully engaged when you're taking off, but also helps with taking off from a stop when you are towing. So this was the road I was going to try and take you guys through on the twisty section at a decent speed, but looks like we have some traffic, so I'm just going to take it slow here and see if I can get some distance. I don't have too many people behind me, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, so that explains, like, if you were to drive one of these vehicles taking off from a stop, it's shifting out of first gear by 5 miles an hour, and it's in third by 15, 16 miles an hour, in fifth gear by 25. And that's obviously with you driving normally, not spiritedly. So the way the gearing is set up, once you're past second gear, you really don't feel the shifts. You hear them, you see it on the tack, but they've managed to do a very good job as far as beyond, you know, the 1-2 shift, just because that first gear is so short. You know, it has to make that shift pretty quickly unless you're getting on it. And because that ratio to that first gear is so short, that's just gonna happen. That's not anything that they're gonna be able to completely ever get rid of, is that 1-2 shift shock, but I can tell you it is a lot less jarring now here in June of 2024 2025 than it was early 2024 on a CX70 prior to the multiple software updates they've gotten. So, alright, so here we go. I'm probably going to have to slow down here in a little bit because these cars are slowing down. I'm catching up to them. But smooth steering inputs. I'm not having to do anything crazy, and the car's just going where I want to. And it being a rear-wheel drive bias platform, it really does make it a fun to drive vehicle, aside from all the other stuff going on. Usually, every vehicle I've had in the past has been front-wheel drive or a front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive based system. So the dynamics have taken me a little bit of getting used to, because in a front-wheel drive car, the way you approach a corner obviously is going to be a little different, and same when it comes to corner exit than a rear-wheel drive vehicle. So that has taken some adjustment. Mazda has used G-vectoring control in their front-wheel drive based vehicles forever, which uses steering wheel angle sensor to detect, one, how fast you're turning in, and then also what kind of power is being made at the time based on throttle input, and it cuts torque to get the car to behave how you want it. Now, obviously, with this being rear-wheel drive, Mazda couldn't do that, and that's where they went with the Kinematic posture control. But also, me having to retrain myself how to drive a front-wheel drive based vehicle versus a rear-wheel drive one. Just being able to get into it on the throttle, on corner exit earlier, not having to worry about as much understeer. Obviously, this is a big, heavy, almost 5,000 pound vehicle. It is going to understeer, but the way I manipulate my right foot going into and out of a corner is a lot different in this versus a front wheel drive based vehicle, but I'm still able to have a hell of a lot of fun. Try to give him some space. This road has a little bit of a decent speed limit, so granted nobody in front of me is even going the speed limit right now. They're going under it. But if not, we'll go ahead and end the video sooner than later. But the main takeaways I wanted to give you guys in this video is, yes, a nearly 5,000 pound vehicle can still be fun to drive. There's just a lot that had to go into it, and luckily Mazda took the chance and had the willingness to do it, because that is what they stand for. They want their cars to be fun to drive regardless of what its use is going to be. 90% of people aren't going to drive the vehicle the way I have been and will continue to, but it is capable for those who do need a bigger vehicle, whether it's for their family, their job, whatever the case may be, and still be able to have fun in it. Especially if you're like me, where right now I don't have the space or the time or money to have a second toy, where I could have got away with a boring plain SUV and still had my fun race car on the side. Right now, this kind of has to perform double duty for me. Not that I'm going to treat it as a race car, but I don't have a race car anymore, so I have to be able to, for me, just being a car enthusiast, the way I am, I have to have something fun to drive. So here we are. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe if this focus is turning where I do, I would hope that maybe I can keep up with them. Nope. Anyways, so we'll turn here. There's a couple twists and turns on this road that I'll take you through, and then we will end it. Suggested speed is 30. No problem. I think it went into that at 46 and left it at 50. Took it like it was nothing. Tight corner, and it's more of a 90-degree turn, but I'm going to take it at some speed and then we'll end it there. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully it was informative, and if you have any ideas as to what you want to see for my next episode on this car, put it in the comments, let me know, and I'll continue to keep making videos, but it would be nice to get some suggestions from you all as well. All right, y'all. See ya.